here?
Yeah, you're here.
Is Daryl Atwell here? Daryl? All right, he had to step out. He's part of the collectors group, part of a young collector. Well, wait a minute, Jarvis, aren't you part of the group?
I was.
All right, well, you're it today. Can you stand up? Daryl had to step out to pick up his mom, but can you speak to the mission of the group?
Well, basically the mission was to support African American artists, locally and nationally. The drive was to really be a collecting group, and also once collected, that they would donate to African American institutions in the area. That was the main goal. So going to art studios, exhibitions, sponsoring seminars and talks, being part of the portfolio for I guess the past 3-4 years. Shawanda Roundtree being in that group, Lisa Fleming, curator at the African American Museum, the New Smithsonian. And
How many members?
6 active time. Ron Frazier, part of that group also, Jennifer Hardy. So there were 6 active that formed it, and they were reaching out to other members.
And it's called the Young.
It's actually CAS 51. CAS 51. It's like DC being the 51st state. Yeah, that's what came up with that.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I'm just drawing a blank. Collective.
I'm sorry?
I just drew a blank here. What
On the acronym for CAS.
It has to. I'll have to ask Daryl what she wanted sometime.
That's
I'll let you know.
Before I take the questions, I also wanted to call on Eric Key. Eric is the director of the University of Maryland University College's art department. And the reason I wanted to draw attention to Eric is because of the university's mission now to acquire works of art by local artists through donation and acquisition. And so I wanted Eric to speak to the significance and the importance of donating to the art bank. I told you, so you should have called me back so I could tell you what I was calling you. Yeah, that's Eric. So to speak to philanthropy and how that is helpful to the institution.
Well, it's helpful to us just to have a representation in the collection. University of Maryland University College didn't have a history of collecting African American art. And my background is African American art, so when I came there, it just became a natural mission to do so. I'm just a firm believer that you can't tell American story without showing all art of all culture and having it in your collection. And so, for the most part, we have a small budget to buy work. We have some endowments, but it's very small. Don't get happy, artists. So I have to balance all cultural groups into this collection. The Maryland collection is the largest collection that we have that was started in 1978. And it was a basic premise, like all of us collect: buy local, show local art, appreciate local artists, and at the same time begin to set values for those artists. And for the most part, that's it.
Thank you. And I'd like to say that Delilah Pierce, whose work is in this exhibition, was one of her works was acquired by the university, and Maya Freelon Asante is also represented by the Galerie, is also part of that collection. And so now I'll open up the floor and take questions. Carol?
Hi, Myrtis. I have a question from the artist's point of view. Is it valid in terms of a collector to stick with an artist who's evolving, or is it more attractive for a collection of different kinds of artists? Say you have an artist that you represent who's young and over time, is that collection a retrospective, I guess?
Well, I think that a person's collection, being that art is an investment, should be diversified as any investment portfolio. And if you get the stock when it's selling at $1, and you watch its growth, then that's indicative of the art. And I think that if you fall in love with a particular artist's work and their artistic expression, then it does behoove the collector to collect at various stages in that artist's career. Yeah. Any other questions? Linda?
When the artists were talking about collecting pieces, I know when I look at art, I fall in love with it. But then I've met an artist, and the artist and the piece didn't go together because the artist had this bad kind of vibe. It ruined the picture for me. And I was wondering, even though I like the piece, because of the artist, I would never, even if I could afford it, I would never have bought it because the vibe just wasn't together. And I thought that once that piece got into my space, then that artist vibe was gonna. So do you? So I was wondering,
Dr.
if
Lynch
you
would like
experienced any of that most of the left?
Well, Dr. Lynch would like to address your question.
I think I'll speak to that, because it's a very interesting and perhaps critical issue. The life of the artist is a very hard life. That none of us who, like myself, are petty bourgeois, bureaucrats, or professionals live. The life of Billie Holiday is a hard life, of Nina Simone, of Charlie Parker, of Monk. So therefore, if you are a dope fiend, I want you to understand that. And you're Bob Thompson, one of our greatest artists, who lived in Paris for a long time because we ran him out of the country. All right? If you are Bob Thompson, then you got to reconcile this man that's dying on his feet and the kind of work that Bob Thompson does. And I assure you, if you have a Bob Thompson, plus the attitude of Miles Davis on any given day, you cannot reconcile. I know it because I do it personally. But you're not going to tell me that you're not going to deal with kind of blue. If you see what I'm saying. It's Miles. So you've got to develop some Christian simpatico.
My question is for the appraiser.
Question for the appraiser?
Not quite as interesting as the question. Looking at the person who does collect and what you would be looking for to assess a collection, you mentioned about things being written and the artists being in books. And a lot of the writing is done, that in my experience, is by African Americans in the literature that is published by African Americans and not mainstream literature. So how does that affect what it is you need to put on these reports when the information that is written about the artist is written by people who look like the artist and not necessarily crossing over into the art nets of the world, because there are only specific people on ArtNet. So you might not see Jeffrey Kent in ArtNet, but you know there are things that could be written by him, about him, in a publication written by somebody else. So how do we make that transition?
I look to you academicians to say, start writing. Yeah, because I can't do anything about that part, and that is an issue. Fortunately, and that's one of the other reasons I say, this is a center here, and we have the opportunity. Howard University can and should have a voice in Driscoll Center and University of Maryland. I'm so glad to meet you. He's been so supportive of me too, and I never met him. But the academicians have to write. They have to write. It's a very weak infrastructure.
Yeah.
It's very weak. I don't have a solution for it, but I tell you it does affect. For me, and that's why my reports take so long, for my work thing, I have to have why I came up with this price. And I work with the Pierce estate, and I had to write everything I know about Delilah Pierce, call people, get all kind of information to substantiate the pricing. But y'all all know her, and if I say her, everybody's like, yeah, of course her things are valuable. Not to my world, it's not. I gotta explain to, that's my job. I explain to my world why she, even though you don't have her on ArtNet, she is worthy of these values.
But I want to say something quite quickly.
Yes, please.
It is our responsibility now that she's told us that the infrastructure is weak.
Yes.
To make sure that our children and grandchildren become the technicians, become the people with the capacity, like Jews have done, to be able to sustain our artistic genius. And that's where it is. You know how she said her father says, no, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do that. We dissipate our children's energy without showing them that this is a way. That her career, her work is a work that is absolutely important to our sustainability. That's the future of it. Rather than saying the answer is in the past, the answer is in the 21st century.
I selfishly asked that question.
Yes.
And I also think that, and I want to make this a responsibility of the artists as they are handled by galleries, to demand that the galleries keep record for them in terms of who their works are sold to take a responsibility to write about them. And I know that not all gallerists are writers, but I am a writer. I write about the artists that I represent. I publish catalogs so that they are recorded. I write for art magazines because we both understand that that void exists and it is critical to fill it. And so I do what I can in my capacity, but I, try to make artists understand that it's not just enough to have your work hung on the walls of a gallery or in a museum. And of course, museums take a greater role in writing because the curators will take responsibility for that. But if you don't make that leap, if you're never acquired by a museum or never shown in a museum setting, then there has to be an infrastructure around that will support our artists and excel them to the next level. Jackie?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what some of you have already said. What's really important is that we mentor the next generation of young scholars. Because we can all write, we can write, but we have to make sure that those coming after us are trained in the field and we can get them interested in the field. I teach history of African American art at Towson State and at MICA and the Harlem Renaissance at both universities. And I teach that course because I told them that they should have those courses in their curriculum. When I taught it at Towson for the first time, I had 30-some students, 5 of whom were African American. 5. Second time it was no different. So, where are the folks that should be taking this course? And I made it a personal interest of mine to make sure that those 5 kids got the most out of that course and understood what they were learning, and I still kept in touch with them.
Yes.
But we have to find, at the Porter Colloquium and all these other conferences that we go to and mentor the next generation of scholars.
Yes, and I also want to add that Jackie also is, are you Director of Education?
I'm Director of Education and I'm a curator at the Walters Art Museum in Baltimore. I almost went back to Minneapolis.
What's her last name? Copeland. And I also want to just put a quick plug in, and I'll call you on next. Too many names floating through my head. Alva is going to be speaking at the Porter Colloquium.
Great, thank you. I have a question for Alva. How do you go about determining how much to charge for appraisal?
Well, we charge about like a lawyer. Because we're like your lawyer, accountant, and your therapist. So it is a business, and we charge by the hour. We cannot charge by the value of your collection. That is unethical, and anybody who does that can be brought up on charges. But the range is really from about $75 to $600 an hour, depending on what part of the country you're in. We do a lot of legal work, so we do depositions and expert witness, so our fees are higher on that end than what we charge you. And I don't charge any of y'all what I charge folks.
Hello, I'm really not new to the Baltimore art scene. We started in the late 70s.
and right in the heart of what they consider the ghetto. At those of you who are Baltimoreans, at Dolphin and Druid Hill Avenue. And it was an art gallery that was nonprofit originally and transformed into profit-making galleries. What I'd like to know, and in our struggles over the years, and it has been a struggle, is how can we, those of us who are putting forth efforts such as the Myrtis Gallery, such as other galleries here in this area, work together collaboratively? Because I'm finding that, just like a lot of things in our community, we are all trying to reach the same goal, but we're doing it individually. And how can, I'm just open for ideas of how we can work collaboratively to make this an even stronger effort.
Well, that's an excellent question, and not one that really can be answered in short and brief. I know for me personally, what you are witnessing is the support of a 20-plus year career of developing relationships with clients and art professionals. And so when you come to the table, you have to bring something of equal value. And that's where the conversation can begin. And I think that's the most I can say in brief, because it's just a lot to consider. And there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of work and dedication and love that you see here. And the people in this room are part of supporting my dream. They have been there when Myrtis was creative artisans working out of the basement of her home, you know, and so this is what you're witnessing.
And I can relate to that. The house has been over 30, well, with my husband, been over 30 years from a gallery, right? Yeah. Over 30 years struggle. So, and my husband, before I met him, was involved in the arts. But I hear what you're saying, but I think we all have something to learn from each other.
Oh, definitely.
You know,
there's
so,
no question about that.
You have to bring expertise as a group.
Well, that's why I think the groups are so important, like the young man that stood up and talked about the young group, but there's Brandywine with Millennium Arts, yes, there are groups that are active that you can become a member of.
And we are a millennium.
Yeah, so those are the places to talk about it, I think.
Yeah. But I understand, fortunately for me, it has not been a struggle. And I think in part because, I mean, we're children of the fathers of the revolution, so I never embraced that idea. And so it's never been a part of my course and nor my approach. And I don't mean to say that to try to put anything negative towards your use of the word. But so I just encourage and invite the opportunity to work with other galleries in Baltimore. I'm very new to Baltimore and the art scene here. I think that we've been embraced very well by the community, and we're seeking to branch out above and beyond those that know of us now. So I welcome the opportunity.
And the struggle has been more in educating the community.
Oh yes, and I know you were using that word loosely because that has been a part of what we continue to deal with, which is why we have the artist talks and the lecture series through the gallery, because we know that that's lacking also.
Well, mine is not a comment. Mine is more of a comment, and after I make my comment, I'm going to put my brother Otis on the spot.
Well, wait a minute. Before she says anything, she is information central.
Yes. Talk about support. Yes.
Her name is Miriam, and so make sure you get on her email address. She is the person who disseminates the information.
My comment is this. I got involved really collecting. My mother said I've been collecting forever because she said that girl just likes old things. I have dishes from 1927, maybe you need to look at it. But my comment is this. You have to support the people that are doing it, whether they're struggling or not. I haven't bought anything from the gallery yet, but I make sure people know about Myrtis and Alva and Parish Gallery, because that's the only little thing I could think I could do was collect the email addresses and send out the emails. And I try to send it blind so people's emails aren't all over the place. And to tell people and to give wonderful elders rides and those kinds of things. So this has been the most wonderful art history class that has lasted for the last 7 years or so, that I couldn't take this at Howard, at Georgetown, at GW, or any place else. So you have to do it yourself. If you've got that information, you start it. You find your little bitty thing. Mine is a string. That's all I have is a string. And I learned things like from Otis, and we talk all the time. Sometimes late at night, and I have to always make sure I honor his wife, because I'm talking to him late at night. And Otis can tell you a story about something that recently happened, because he's one of the few African Americans on an acquisition board at a museum. That's true. And I just wish he would tell that story, just his short version of it, so that you know what is happening out here, and you find your little piece of the string and tie it to my piece and Alva's piece and Myrtis's piece and whomever's piece. And like Lewis has his granddaughter here. When my grandchildren are visiting, they're with me, even though my daughter said, Mom, they don't want to do that. Yes, they do, because I'm doing it. And I'm driving the car, and I'm filing it down.
That's right. You're in charge. I used to say, no, I'm in charge.
But my children did it, so they go to museums. But Otis, would you just tell that story about the recent acquisition of that piece?
The Aaron Douglas?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Everybody needs to know this.
My name is Otis Robertson. I live here in Maryland. I grew up here in Baltimore. I'm the only Afro-American on the acquisitions committee for the Delaware Art Museum. And what Miriam is referencing to is the acquisition of an Aaron Douglas that we purchased about a year or so ago. And it was just an uphill battle. But basically what it is, the way the acquisition committee works is that at the Delaware Art Museum, you have the director, the curators, and then you have not a board, but you have a group of us who are on the acquisitions committee. And the other members, you have about 10 members. So you have the curators, and then you also have the director. Each one has a vote. So at this particular meeting, the Aaron Douglas came up along with another artist's work, a white artist, I can't remember the name now, it was a sculpture. And the acquisitions committee had no problem in terms of paying close to $800,000 for the sculpture that they had determined to buy. But when it came to the Aaron Douglas, the committee voted it no. Now, what the committee knew at the time was that, and what a lot of people didn't realize, is that Aaron Douglas had two cousins that lived in the Wilmington, Delaware area. And there were two houses in the Afro-American community where he had painted murals on the inside. Now both of these murals still exist today, and the houses are owned by a particular person. I still don't know who it is, because that person wishes to remain anonymous. And the director of the museum wanted to possibly get a rich patron to purchase the houses, try to preserve them in the Afro-American community and preserve those murals, and then buy the study, which was one of the murals inside that a family in Philadelphia was selling at that time. So she explained that to the committee, but the committee still said no. And at the end, one of the committee members said, well, if we can get the Afro-American community in Wilmington, Delaware to come up with $250,000, then I would vote to go ahead and purchase the study. And I came up out of my seat, and I said, that's racist. I said, you didn't ask the white community to come up with $500,000 to pay for that sculpture that you just asked to pay for. And I said, so why are you gonna go to the Afro-American community and ask them for $250,000 on something they don't even know about? And I said, because those murals have been kept secret. They've been kept hush-hush, I said, for a number of years. So the director and the head of the committee came to me after the meeting. Now, the director was on my side, but the president of the acquisitions committee, he said, "Hey, look, Otis, look, you know, we just don't know about Aaron Douglas." I went on the internet and I found Aaron Douglas and I studied him for about 2 hours. But the rest of the committee members don't really know anything about Aaron Douglas, and I said, "That's totally unacceptable." So the director came to me in the parking lot and she said, "Otis, you're exactly right." She said, "That was racist, and I'm going to see what I can do to try to raise some money and see if we can acquire the Aaron Douglas." So the city of Wilmington kicked in some money. One of the members on the acquisitions committee kicked in like $25,000 because they felt guilty about the fact that they voted no. And they got money from a couple of grants and from some of the patrons there. They decided, well, yeah, we think that's a good idea, because I had even gotten a call from the Smithsonian saying, "Otis, are you guys going to purchase that Aaron Douglas? Because if you're not, we'll purchase it." And so they knew that, and the director even said that, said, "We don't purchase this Aaron Douglas, we're going to have egg on our face." And she knew that. And the curators, the director, and myself, we were all together. We were, you know, trying to get it done. So finally it got done. And it just
Janice?
I own a bed and breakfast here. It's dedicated to art done by us, but I volunteered to, okay, I'm sorry, let me start back. Hampton University at one point was publishing, and still publishes, the magazine on African American art. At one point, they were trying to do a registry of Black people who own art, so that they could know who the art, you know, who owned what, where, and when. So I went to them to volunteer to give them my list, and they said they had stopped doing it. So I volunteered to donate my time to try to develop a list. When I get the list, I'll gladly share it with any university or college, but that's what I'm going to do. So for those of you who have art and you'd like to put it on the list so that people know where it is, I'm here.
Wait, I have, did you have?
I may have asked first.
I'm sorry?
I wanted to ask Janice.
Oh, someone wanted to ask a question?
Yes.
Okay.
Did they give you a reason why they stopped the publication in view of the fact that the president of Hampton is a major collector, major art collector?
Yes, they said that they
Not necessarily just Black art, but he's a major collector, so.
personal. They said that they did not have the staff or the funds.
Now, the museum, I'm sorry, the magazine still exists.
Yeah.
She's talking specifically about the registry.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Because I write for the magazine, so the magazine still exists.
In the initial presentation of Cultivating Fine Art, I noticed that there was attention paid to the fact that the art is appreciable.
Yes.
And the factors were given as to why collectors collect. But I did not hear, and I don't know whether that was an omission or what, the fact that there are collectors who collect in order to support our own. There was little or no attention paid to the fact that our artists, if there weren't aficionados like us, the artists would not survive. And so that would be one of the reasons for collecting. And I was just questioning why that was.
Well, because that was demonstrated through the conversation and the dialogue with the collectors. So I didn't seek to cover every aspect and every purpose and intent for collecting. I knew that that would be addressed through the dialogue with the candidates. And I think that they demonstrated that beautifully.
It's quite a responsibility. On the other hand, it's sometimes I generally wish I had just so much more money than I do, and that would that would be so that that aspect of collecting could for me dominate the process. It always comes out. You're paying for a piece, $500 here, and then in another 2 weeks another $5, and so you're stringing artists along, and they're very grateful. And it occurs to me, kind of from the back end, that's another role, because they're very keen on what you could possibly pay them, even if you've said that you'll pay them in 6 months, you'll pay the whole thing, and artists still come back and say, well, do you think possibly this week you could make a small payment? I don't think this is where you were going, but I'd love to be able to finance 6 months of an artist's life at one time, as opposed to paying little bits on their.
Well, and she's very modest, because I know that she serves as a benefactor for a couple of artists, whose names I won't mention.
More than a couple.
Well, okay, I was trying to be modest, I know. Yeah, there are several who she actually serves as a benefactor.
But there's not enough. It can be difficult, and that's all part of it. Too bad we all don't have so much money to spend.
Definition of a benefactor, Myrtis.
A benefactor is someone who, and this was done back in the late Renaissance, 19th century, 20th century. It's someone who basically supports an artist, and so that they can produce their work, and they don't have to work outside of the studio, basically. So they provide financial support.
There's something to that too. Yeah, this is one of the first times in the history of the world where artists try to support themselves with the art. Almost traditionally, throughout history, they were some rich person's niece or nephew or son or daughter, and they couldn't work in the factory or whatever, and so they did the art and their family supported. This is artists trying to make a living at art is quite a new concept.
Yeah, I agree. I just wanted to know what the definition was. Does that mean buying 3 pieces that's 10 pieces a year? Or does that mean actually paying them a salary?
Setting them up, like Jonathan Green is a friend of mine, he doesn't mind telling the story. He has a benefactor.
Yes, he does.
And when you have one, look at his career. He was handled. He was, cared for. He goes up at 4 o'clock in the morning and he gets the light. And now, how many artists are able to, work with the light? They got to go take their kids, they got to go work. They got to come back. So that's, Jonathan. That's the model for the benefit.
No, wait. I'm sorry. This gentleman's been trying to pose this question for a while.
My question is for Alva. For a fledgling collector, what is the impact, who has limited funds, what is the impact of framing on the appraisal piece, and what do you recommend as a percentage to cost ratio when you're considering framing and presentation?
Well, and that's a great question, and I'm going to give the factual answer. For appraising, it has absolutely nothing to do with what
Amen.
Unless, there is an aside, unless, like I did some, Maylou Jones, she made her own frame. So when the frame is made by the artist and is part of the artwork, then it goes into, but outside of that, there are actually people who appraise frames. So you can go and get your frames appraised. But
I just wanted to follow up by saying that the value is in the artwork itself. The frame is actually there to preserve and support it on your wall or wherever.
Thank you. I have 2.
But a poor frame makes a great picture look horrible.
I have 2 questions for Alva and Dr. Lynch et al. Alva, is it possible to, or can you reconcile commercial value of artwork versus, that also has sentimental value. Particularly when the artist may have been an up-and-coming artist back in the day, and I'm talking late 60s, who almost summited but lost his life way too early. How do you reconcile that?
Well, that's a good question. Janice and I and some of the people I mentioned and when we talked earlier are working on what we call the multipliers. Going to conferences and being around our colleagues, we learned that there's a thing called the multipliers that we never knew about until recently. And we were able to put, well, I'll give you an example of how we learned about the multipliers. Thomas Jefferson desk. One of my colleagues did appraisal of some works on his desk. So some pieces had something written on it by him, and then there were these 3 blank pages. So what is 3 blank pages, you know? But it was on his desk, so they used, in quote, the multipliers to value those 3 blank pages as $300 each. So when they did this, because there's no training around the multipliers, it was like, what is that? I mean, how can you do that? And they oh, that's the multipliers. So we're now working on our multipliers for people's career, like Ms. Pierce or Alvin. We had the problem with Hollingsworth. We had a problem appraising his work because he sold it himself. He came in and out of the market. You know, you didn't know kind of what the price is. So we're creating the multipliers for the African American artists, but we have to get them approved after we get them.
So what does that mean? Significant factors that go in?
That means whatever they made it. Yeah, that's. Nobody could give us a definition of the multipliers, but everybody is using them, we found out.
And my second question is to Dr. Lynch and the rest of the panel. Dr. Lynch, as we talked between the break, it warmed my heart that you focused a lot on travel. That's what we do as broadcasters. And I'm curious, in your travels, in your meeting of artists, has there been one transformative experience or introduction that you had or heartwarming story that you can share?
You bring yourself to the table with some integrity and some honesty. You don't go as a superior American or as a superior black person or as a superior anything or a superior academician. You simply bring yourself in the most humble way before someone who you want to engage with in a dialogue about life. Because spirituality and creativity are perhaps the most important dimensions of our life. Not violence and war, but peaceful reciprocity is what we're looking for. And that's what I found. And I found artists very, very responsive to that sense of reciprocity, of sharing with each other. And you bring yourself in the most humble way, you know. That's what
And please forgive me. I'm not sure really that I heard the question. I'm sure I heard it, but what was it?
Is in your travels, Dr. Lynch and I know Lewis specifically mentioned their interest in meeting some of the artists and getting to know and immersing themselves in the local culture through these artists. And so my question was, has there been a significant transformative experience in your travels, whether it be domestic or abroad, in meeting some of these artists, and what was that?
Well, if you'll forgive me, I'm not going to belabor it. The answer was absolutely, of course. Many of my friends are artists, you know, painters, sculptors, musicians, or writers. And when that began to happen 5-10 years ago, that's when my life took off. So, you know, yes, I know them, I love them. It's all synergistic. I poured tons of money on them to the extent that I have it. They give me art. My life is full, and we are friends. And I love it.
I would just relate an experience, that I had in Bali. We were traveling there, and in this hotel, they had plenty of artwork, but there was nothing that caught our eye. So we asked our guide about artists in the community, and he took us to the studio of the same person who had all this artwork on display in the hotel. And he told us before we got there that he wasn't able to really sell a lot, so it would mean a lot if we bought something. Well, we got to the studio and he had mounds and mounds of works, but nothing that really attracted us. So the wife said, "Can you do a market scene? Or do you have a market scene?" And he said, "No, but I can get it." I said, "We're leaving tomorrow." He says, "Don't worry." And I kid you not, this was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. At 7 o'clock, before we left for the airport, this guy was at the hotel with this painting on, it was acrylics. It was approximately 14 by 20 in detail and everything. The paint was hardly even dry. It was beautiful, but and the price was unbelievable. It was really a bargain. And excuse me, we always looked at that picture and said, you know, you really helped somebody in making that purchase. But not only that, it was the joy that we got from seeing it through the years. And it really brings back memories every time you look at it.
Wow. Well, we're going to close with that. And, well, I'll take one more question and then I'll close.
It's not a question, but I'd like to give some kudos to Robbie for her real generosity here in the arts community of Baltimore. We have several members here. Here from the Joshua Johnson Council at the Baltimore Museum of Art, and we're the African American group there that you know, assists with helping the museum think about this programming, what kinds of pieces it might collect. And I would just like to invite you all, those that aren't members and don't know about the council, to join us. We meet every second Thursday at the museum at like 6 o'clock. And we're open for membership, of course. So come see us.
And I meant to call on Antoinette, so I'm glad that to speak to that. And I'm glad that you did. Thank you. A couple of things before I officially close. Yes?
I would just like to publicly thank you for the opportunity.
Well, in closing, I would like to do two things. I would like to recognize Elsa Gibriesas. She is one of the artists that we represent here at the gallery. Elsa is a phenomenal woman artist who, I'm proud to say, the State Department had just bought 3 or 4 of her pieces from through the gallery that are going to be installed in a embassy in Madagascar. The installation will take place next month. And Elsa is having a solo exhibition at the gallery in September of this year. So thank you. Yes. Thank you all for coming. I hope that you found the information shared today useful and helpful, and I encourage you all to go about your collecting with deliberate and purposeful intent. Thank you.